This is the CitizenLink Report.
If you find our insights helpful, would you support our video efforts? Your gift of $25 or more goes a long ways. Covers the crew, lights, cameras, all that. Just click on Donate. Thanks from all of us. New Jersey's governor signs a law limiting individual freedom and religious freedom. You should be keeping an eye on what's happening. This is the CitizenLink Report. I'm Stuart Shepard along with Tom Minnery, the Executive Director of CitizenLink. Hi, Tom.
Hello, Stuart.
Earlier this week, Governor Chris Christie signed a bill into law that's all about gay activism taking away personal freedom. Tell us what it's about.
Well, he's banned so-called therapies to try to get young people to change their minds about not wanting to be homosexuals if they think that's where they're headed. Now, there is no social science evidence to say that such is harmful. And to say that someone ought to continue on a road of sexual confusion when he or she is a young person probably needs a whole lot of help from psychologists, from counselors, from pastors perhaps. To say that you can't get that is shortchanging the health of a young person who is basically probably confused. And for the governor to do that, I can see why he would do it. This is a politically correct thing to do. He's bowing in the face of huge social pressure from people in that liberal state of New Jersey who want him to go the other way completely.
Now, to be clear what we're talking about, we're not talking about taking a young person unwillingly and forcing them into a program. We're talking about a young person who's not happy with the way they're feeling, who's wanting to seek help. This takes away that opportunity.
Right, and change therapies for unwanted same-sex sexual expression are common, and there is a history of them working well. Many people have lost their confusion about sexuality as a result of them to the good. And as society prides itself on putting homosexuality on a pedestal, you can see how more and more young people might think they are gay, might think they are lesbian, but what they are probably is just confused and need precisely the kind of help that the governor, by signing this law, says they cannot have. That's a tragedy.
Now, we live in popular culture through television, movies, the news that we watch, all different sources coming at us. Gay activism has been so successful in changing what's said through all of those channels that I suspect many people hear what you just said and their head tilts a little bit and they're thinking, Tom, you're out of touch with reality. Everybody knows, quote unquote, that people are born this way. There's nothing they could do to change even if they wanted to, and it's perhaps even harmful to try it. Why are you taking that position? How would you respond to that?
Well, the people who are not in touch with the reality are the people who espouse the views that you just said. If we had time today, and we need to do this in an upcoming program, we need to go through some of the latest social science evidence that concludes very clearly that those who engage in unhealthy sexual practices such as homosexual activity, those who parent children who they themselves are same-sex couples have some problems to deal with, problems to handle, and it results in how their children are raised. A huge new study shows that children raised in homes headed by same-sex couples have lots of indicators of bad outcomes on many levels. So this is a big area, and we need to get into it soon.
The other question people might be asking is, I don't live in New Jersey, what's the big deal?
Well, is a trend, and it is coming to a state near you without question.
All right. Tom, this is a great topic to bring in some questions that were sent to us this week, and it's an insightful question. I wanted to pitch it to you and get your thoughts on it. Bill writes and asks us, I'm going to quote from his note, I won't read the whole thing, but I'll give you the gist of his argument. He says, I wonder if someone could give me some logical reason why we Christians keep our best challenge tools locked in the closet. If, and he gives an example, Party A has a belief and Party B has an opposing belief, they discuss their opinions and it goes something like this. Party A, I like to do it, it feels good. Party B responds, yes, but statistics show that activity results in problems. And he goes on, he makes the point, there's not more weight on the balance scale of one position against the other position. So he suggests this. He says, let's get off that pedestal and move the debate to a fresh foundation. Party A, say, is an atheist, does not believe in morality, the Ten Commandments. Well, let's talk in terms of liberty in that conversation. Is there any other set of 6 guidelines, 6 rules, which more clearly define liberty, equal freedoms for all parties than the last 6 statements of the Ten Commandments? And those are the ones that deal with morality and interactions between people. Well, violation of any one of those 6 commandments in some way must take from the liberty of the other person. Why is this never discussed? And Tommy, he pitches it this way. I think we've allowed the unbelieving to mesmerize, paralyze, and deny the use of scriptural truths in discussing issues. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, that's a good question. Happy to discuss it. First of all, I think I'm not so sure that if someone can make an argument for liberty, that will trump someone else's argument. People such as we prize liberty. I don't know that everybody does. The second thing to be said is that the Ten Commandments, used correctly, are pretty good in secular circumstances. I remember arguing in a debate once that somebody suggested we get rid of all these religious dictates in public life. We are a secular society. We ought to maintain secularism throughout. I said, well, good. Let's talk about something. Let's talk about the laws that say we cannot steal. Now, thou shalt not steal is a very, very religious concept coming right from the Ten Commandments, obviously. It's pretty good for helping us to order society. Just because it's religious, should we remove the laws against stealing? What about the laws against committing murder? Nothing is more religious than thou shalt not kill, meaning to murder. That comes from the Ten Commandments. Should we get rid of that just because it's religion? I don't think so. Some religious laws make very good societal laws.
I used a very similar discussion. It was on a Facebook conversation and brought that same thing up when someone suggested, well, we shouldn't have any laws based on religion. And I used the same argument. Well, murder, are we going to strike that from the books just because? Or do we all accept that certain things are true and then we move from that platform? Tom, the other thing that we've talked about here on occasion is this, and that is, if the Bible is true, and we believe that it is, the truth of the Bible is going to show up in that social science data that's out there. And the language of our culture right now tends to lean, if you're not in the Christian realm, on the idea of research shows, science says, this expert found, and that's the proper language to start the conversation out there in the public square.
Well, it is. You used a couple of important words, language and culture. I think back to Acts 17, when Paul came into Athens, and he was furious because he saw the statues to pagan gods, and he heard people talking about things that were anathema to the Christian faith. And so he rushed right in and began telling people about Jesus. The response he got, what is this babbler trying to say? And then Paul backed off a little bit. He tried to make a cultural connection. He said, I see you have an inscription here, to an unknown God. Let me tell you about that unknown God. And then he came back to the idea of the God of the Bible. He didn't get into Jesus Christ very specifically, but he was trying to win an argument by appealing to the cultural language that people understand. So you don't lead with Scripture, and very often you do not lead with scriptural principles that are so obvious that people will click off because they do that so quickly.
But you do lead them to the Scripture. I mean, that's the beginning of the conversation, but it's not to say it doesn't proceed then to a discussion of things that are spiritual.
Right, it's kind of like a missionary. When a missionary prepares to go in a foreign mission field, what is the first thing he does? He learns to speak their language. Depending on the culture, he or she learns how to dress like they do. He or she then learns to live as they do. When you do all that, when you show the love of Christ, when you earn the right to be heard, then you can lead people toward Christ. But if you start with that, or if you have an argument that's so thinly veiled that people can see through it, then I think you hurt yourself argumentatively, you don't help yourself.
So if I may summarize, there is a place for using the last 6 of the 10 commandments in the public square, but it's the proper context, the proper time, the right place in the conversation.
Right, I just think, the one that's so debated, adultery. I don't know how I would get that used in a secular context early in the conversation. Sexuality has so much overtone of his rights, my rights, whatever we choose to do in the privacy of our bedroom, blah, blah, blah. I am not so sure I would get into the 10 Commandments very quickly, although, as we said before, sometimes it can be helpful depending on the precise circumstance.
It makes me wonder, we were talking about Governor Christie at the beginning of this discussion. As part of his signing the bill, he expressed his belief now that homosexuality is not a sin and that people are born that way. If you're basing an argument on the 10 Commandments, I would really hope a reporter would look at him and say, if immorality is okay, are you okay with adultery? Is that what you're saying? I mean, what sins are in, which ones are out, Governor Christie?
And somebody ought to ask that question of his wife. What about adultery?
She would probably have an opinion on that. Tom, thank you for your insights. Appreciate that.
Oh, you're welcome.
And thank you for watching. We do appreciate it when you send your questions and your comments and your insights. It's good for us. It helps us think about what to talk about here. We hope that was a helpful conversation for you. You may write to us at mail@citizenlink.com. Send us your questions, your comments, your insights. You can disagree with this too if you want. That's helpful as well. And remember to pray for our elected officials. Even at the state level, those governors of the 50 states out there and the territories, pray for them that they have wisdom and discernment as they fulfill their duties in public office. And remember, stand tall and be heard.